MashaAllah. Good to see you all, MashaAllah. Bismillah, walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. I remind you, brothers and sisters, to have a sincere intention in your heart when attending the lesson, seeking reward from Allah Ta'ala. Inshallah, you are remembering also within the days left of Ramadan to make a lot of dua, to teach the lessons that you are learning, to share them and to teach them to others as well, and to give charity. And maybe you give something to a person who is fasting to break his fast on, such as even if it is a date or something little, with a sincere intention, inshallah, you'll have reward. Not exactly the same reward as the reward of the person who fasted, no, but the person will be rewarded, inshallah, when one gives a fasting person something to break his fast on. Our topic today is something very important for both males and females. And the one who does not learn this information that we will be talking about, inshallah, might have prayers to make up, and the person does not know that because this person did not learn this section. So one might have prayers that one needs to make up, but one does not know about it. Like, for example, when the female has her menses. When the female has her menses, during the bleeding, she is not obligated to pray. In fact, she is not to pray while she has her menses. So this is an example of a matter that might occur to the person that prevents the prayer from being an obligation. So if an inhibitive matter, such as menses, the example that I just gave, if an inhibitive matter, inhibitive here means a matter that prevents the prayer from being an obligation upon the person. If an inhibitive matter, such as menses, occurs after sufficient time to perform the prayer has passed since the setting in of the prayer time, then in this case, when the prohibitive matter is over, one has to make up that prayer. I will repeat it and give you another example. If an inhibitive matter, and we said inhibitive here means a matter that prevents the prayer from being an obligation upon the person. So what are examples of this prohibitive matter that prevents the prayer from being an obligation upon the person? Such as, for example, menses, the menstrual bleeding, or the postpartum bleeding, or insanity, if the person became suddenly crazy, for example. So if this inhibitive matter occurred, and we gave examples of this inhibitive matter, if it occurred after the time of the prayer has set in, and this time was enough to perform that prayer for a person who can perform the wudu before the prayer time, in this case, when this inhibitive matter terminates, one has to make up this prayer. Usually, for many people, they can perform wudu, ablution, even before the prayer time starts. We're talking about the case where the person can make ablution, wudu, before the time of the prayer. For example, let's say you made ablution, wudu for the Dhuhr prayer, and you still have wudu, and then Asr prayer sets in. You can still pray the Asr with that same wudu if you did not do what invalidates the wudu. Let's say this person then, after the prayer time started, thought to himself, I'll pray in a while. You know, you do not have to pray right away when the prayer time starts, right? Let's say after 15 minutes of the prayer time set in, an inhibitive matter occurred with this person, such as that this person had her menses, this female had her menses, she started having her menses, or, for example, a male became insane, These two are examples of an inhibitive matter, a matter that prevents the prayer from being an obligation upon this person. Because when the female has her menses, she is not obligated to pray. The crazy person, while being crazy, is not obligated to pray. So, if after the prayer time started, let's say after half an hour, this inhibitive matter happened to this person, now they are not to pray while they have this inhibitive matter. Let's say the inhibitive matter ended after the Dhuhr prayer was over. In this case, we look when this inhibitive matter started. Was there time enough to perform this prayer? In our example, we said the inhibitive matter occurred 30 minutes after the prayer time set in, after the Dhuhr time set in. Is 30 minutes enough to perform the prayer? Yes. So in this case, when the inhibitive matter terminates, is over, this person is obligated to make up the Dhuhr prayer. They are not sinful for not having prayed it before because they were going to pray it. They said, we will pray it, for example, in half an hour, in an hour. They wanted to pray it. They didn't have to pray it right away when its time starts. No, but they had intended to perform it a bit later within its time. But before that, an inhibitive matter occurred, such as menses, such as insanity. And this half an hour, when the prayer time set in, and when the inhibitive matter occurred, this half an hour in between was time enough to perform the prayer. In this case, then, the person has to make up the Dhuhr prayer when the inhibitive matter is over. So in the example of the female who had her menses, let's say she has her menses for 6 days. She needs to keep in mind that when her menses started, there was time enough for her to pray the Dhuhr prayer. So she needs to keep in mind, okay, after my menses is over, I need to make up that Dhuhr prayer. So when her menses is over, she makes up that Dhuhr prayer because that Dhuhr prayer time has set in and there was time enough for her to perform it before her menses started. Is this clear before we move on to the second case? Does anybody want me to repeat this first part? Okay. So the example we gave is then the person looks at whether there was time enough to perform the prayer before this inhibitive matter occurred. Was there time enough when the prayer set in, started? Was there time enough to perform the prayer? If the answer is yes, that time was enough, then one has to make up this prayer when the inhibitive matter terminates. This was in the case of the person who can make wudu, ablution, before the prayer time. However, there are cases where the person has to make wudu after the prayer time starts. This is, for example, if a person has incontinence of urine, when the urine constantly drips, for example, okay? So if, for example, a person has incontinence of urine, this is one example. There are other examples, okay? But this is an example where this person has to make wudu to pray the prayer after the prayer time set in. So for example, if this person wants to pray al-Asr, the late afternoon prayer, this person would have to make wudu after the Asr time starts. They make wudu and they go right away to start the prayer. They don't delay without an excuse, okay? Because they have this particular issue. In our example that we gave, incontinence of urine, where the urine constantly drips. So in this case, this person has to make ablution wudu after the time of the prayer sets in. So they make ablution after Asr time sets in, they pray Al-Asr. For Maghrib, again, they wait until Maghrib time sets in, then they make wudu and proceed to pray the Maghrib prayer. Because they have a matter where they have to make wudu for the prayer that they want to pray after its time sets in, okay? So in this case, where the person has to make wudu for the prayer after the time of the prayer sets in this case, this person, when the inhibitive matter occurs, this person looks, was there enough time before the inhibitive matter occurred and the time of the prayer started? Okay? Was this time enough not just to perform the prayer, but also to make wudu ablution? Because this person has to make ablution after the time starts. So for this person, they look after the prayer time set in and before the inhibitive matter occurred. Was this time enough to perform the prayer and the ablution? If the answer is yes, then when the inhibitive matter terminates, this person has to make up that prayer. If the answer is no, then this person does not have to make up that prayer. Okay? So this was an example of when an inhibitive matter occurs to the person after the prayer time has set in. And we said inhibitive means something that prevents the prayer from being an obligation, such as postpartum bleeding, such as fainting, such as becoming insane, such as menses. Okay? Now we're going to talk about the case when the inhibitive matter terminates. So let's give the example of the female who has her menses. Let's say she, the dhuhr time, the dhuhr prayer time started at 1 o'clock, for example. And she said that she will pray later on, but after half an hour, menses started. Her menses bleeding started. And we said half an hour is enough time for her to perform the prayer. So she keeps in mind that after the menses is over, she has to make up that dhuhr prayer. Okay? Now, what if now when the menses is over, when the inhibitive matter is over? If the inhibitive matter ends and there was enough time left of the prayer where the inhibitive matter terminated within this prayer time, and there was enough time of the prayer left to say Allahu Akbar, or more, but not less, or more, not less, then one is obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it if it is combinable with it for a religious excuse. So let's say in our example of this female who has her menses. Let's say after 6 days, her menses terminated and it was during Isha time. So let's say at before dawn, let's say half an hour before dawn. When I say half an hour before dawn, which prayer time is this? Who can tell us? Who's 100% sure and can tell us? When I say half an hour before dawn, which prayer time is this? Isha. Yes, Isha. So, because the prayer that is before dawn is Isha. Okay? So, if let's say before dawn, half an hour before dawn, she saw that her menses was over. Half an hour before dawn. She looks, this time, isn't it enough to say Allahu Akbar? Yes, for sure. In her case, half an hour is even enough time for her to make ghusl and pray Isha. So she doesn't leave it. She doesn't say, oh, it's in the middle of the night, I'm sleepy. No, she woke up and she saw that her menses terminated. Half an hour time is enough for her to make ghusl and perform the Isha. She does not leave it. She has time to pray it. So, but I'm saying this half an hour is enough time to say Allahu Akbar. So in this case, she performs the Isha. And the prayer before it, if it is combinable with it. But let's look. What is the prayer that is before Al-Isha? What is the prayer that comes before Al-Isha? Somebody tell us. Maghrib. Yes, Maghrib time. Maghrib and Isha, are they combinable for a religious excuse when there is a valid excuse for that? Yes, such as, for example, when traveling with specific conditions. Inshallah, later on we'll talk about that. But they can be combined for a religious valid excuse. They can be combined. The Maghrib and Isha and Dhuhr and Asr. Okay, so the prayers that can be combined for a religious valid excuse are the Dhuhr and the Asr, and the Maghrib and the Isha. In our case, when her period terminated before dawn, there was time enough for her to say Allahu Akbar. Okay, so she prays the Isha, and she looks. What is the prayer that is before the Isha? It is Al-Maghrib. Are they combinable for a valid excuse? The answer is yes. Then she also has to pray the Maghrib. Okay? Of course, while if she had her period during Maghrib time, she does not pray. But we're saying now, when her period terminated before dawn, and there was time enough to say Allahu Akbar, so she prays the Isha, and she looks at the prayer before it, if it is combinable with it or not. Maghrib and Isha are combinable for a valid excuse. Then she also makes up Al-Maghrib. I'll give you another example, inshallah, to make it clear. Let's say a person became insane, and an insanity is an example of what? An inhibitive matter, which makes the prayer not an obligation. Okay, it prevents the prayer from being an obligation upon the person. Let's say the person became insane for a while, and then before Maghrib time, let's say 2 minutes before Maghrib time, his insanity terminated. Okay, he was no longer insane. When was that? 2 minutes before Maghrib time. So which time is that in? It's the time of which prayer? If we're saying 2 minutes before Maghrib time, it's the time of which prayer? Asr. Yes, very good. That's the prayer time of the Asr. So before the Maghrib is the Asr time. Okay. In this case, the inhibitive matter terminated. What does this person look at? Was there time enough to what? When the inhibitive matter terminates, I look at whether there was time enough to say Allahu Akbar. In this person's case, 2 minutes, is this time enough to say Allahu Akbar? Yes, yes. So in this case, then this person has to perform the Asr. Let's say he did not have enough time, so the Asr time was over. He has to, after let's say Maghrib time entered, he didn't have enough time to pray Asr. He still has to pray the Asr because the inhibitive matter, the insanity, terminated before Maghrib, and there was time enough to say Allahu Akbar. So this person has to pray the Asr. And what did we say? We look at the prayer that is before Al-Asr. What is the prayer that is before Al-Asr? Dhuhr. The prayer that is before Al-Asr is Dhuhr. Then we look, Al-Asr and Dhuhr, are they combinable when there is a valid excuse to do that? Is the Dhuhr and the Asr combinable when there is a valid excuse to do that, such as traveling within its conditions? Yes, yes. So in this case, then, this person has to pray the Asr, and what else? The Dhuhr as well. Okay? So to sum it up so that it is clear, when an inhibitive matter occurs, and there was occurs, I'm saying now starts, when the inhibitive matter occurs, and there was time enough when the prayer time set in before the inhibitive matter occurred. There was time enough to perform the prayer for the person who can make wudu before the time of the prayer. In this case, we look, was there enough time to perform the prayer? If the answer is yes, they have to make up that prayer. As for the case of the person who cannot perform wudu for the prayer that they want to pray before its time starts, in this case, we look at whether when the prayer set in and this inhibitive matter occurred, we look at was there time enough to perform the prayer and wudu. If the answer is yes, they have to make up that prayer. In the case of when the inhibitive matter terminates. When the inhibitive matter terminates, here we'll look at whether there was time enough of the prayer in which time the inhibitive matter terminated. We look at whether there was time enough to say Allahu Akbar. If the answer is yes, there was time enough to say Allahu Akbar, then one has to pray that prayer, and the prayer before it, if it is combinable with it, for a valid excuse. And we said that the prayers that are combinable for a religious excuse are the Dhuhr and the Asr, and the Maghrib with the Isha. Okay, these are the prayers that can be combined.